So with sequencing, we're trying to look at the order that each of these parts, the order and sort of speed that each of these parts are going. So HitTrax measures pelvis, shoulders, and front arm. And typically in the most efficient thing, we would see pelvis, shoulders, front arms in that order. We would see them hit their peaks. So they might start rotating together, but we would see them hit their peaks. So with this hitter, one thing that we'll notice is, first, if we look at front arm here, you'll see that it goes first. And a lot of times the reason that we'll see something like that, maybe traditionally we would call this arm bar or something like that. And it's not that, we want to be careful about saying things like arm bar is always bad, anything like that with hitting, because a lot of styles and a lot of patterns work, and there's a big variety. But what we see here with this hitter is that the first thing that goes, the first thing that peaks, I'm just going to go back to sort of current frame so we see it, is right when she's getting into rotation, we'll see that this first thing that peaks is her front arm. And you can kind of watch this happen with your eye too, where you'll see sort of that forced movement with her arm to lock in. And the reason we see this in a lot of, especially amateur hitters as they're getting stronger, is that we need to feel that stretch to get power. We need to feel that tension in our swing. And so we have to create that feeling of stretch somewhere. And if we don't get it through the middle of our body, then we'll create it somewhere else. And a common place to create it is by sort of locking out or feeling some tension through that front arm. So you'll see that happen, and she hits that peak here. And the reason we care about this is how we unravel from this position. So if I lock in this way, I sort of push my arm, right? I push to this move here and I lock in. What we want to then ask is, can the hitter get to what she needs to get to from here? So if you remember, we talk about hitting as hitting the ball as hard as possible, as often as possible. And when we think about often, we want to be able to hit all pitch locations, hit it to all fields, be able to adjust to certain pitches, change ups, different movements. And we can see that as this hitter goes through rotation. So it's front arm, and again, we'll go back to peak, front arm, and then shoulders and pelvis kind of peak together as she goes forward, right? And one of the really, really awesome benefits of having biomechanics in HitTrax is that we get the batted ball data at the same time. And so when we go over here to contact point, and look how deep she's making contact. So one thing we want to ask ourselves here is, because she sort of locks out that front arm and goes through that rotation then all together, we want to see, can this hitter hit contact anywhere else? Or are we locked into this really, really deep contact point? And this will obviously limit us. If we see inside pitches, right? Can we get to a high pitch from this bat path? And so when we see ourselves going out of sequence, we think about, what is the impact this has on my bat path? What is the impact this has on my adjustability? And for this hitter, what we see is, she makes contact really deep because of it. And then when we go all the way back to the spray chart, we'll see that all of her hits are to that sort of center field, right center gap. And that's a real sign of some inefficiencies in rotation. And so this is something we definitely want to monitor, is thinking about sequence. Again, be really careful of just saying it must be exactly this, but understand it. And when we look that her front arm goes really fast and we look at the impact of that, that will give us a good game plan of how are we going to try to influence this movement pattern so that we can see this hitter start to be able to get that bat a little more out front on different pitches, get to different parts of the zone so she can have a little more adjustability. So when we see a sequence where the arm is leading, a good tool that we like to use to help the hitter feel that is the long trainer. So when we get a longer bat and a heavier bat, it gives them good feedback for when they're sort of relying on those hands to create that sequence of that bat path, because it sort of takes them even more exaggerated. It makes it harder for them to get the barrel up front. So it's really good feedback because they'll fail on the drills if they don't start feeling a better sequence. And then there are two drills on top of that that we really like to use to help that. One is hit flips, which is we're tossing from in to in, and we're asking the hitter to think about pulling the ball. So HitTrax is a great tool to use for this for feedback, because we're trying to ask them to pull for power. And sometimes in the cages, hitters don't really understand what that means. They think, center field is pull side or the grounder to the left side. And so we're really asking them to drive it hard in the outfield to the left field side for righties or to the right field side for lefties. And then another drill we like to use is sweep drill. And this is where we're asking them to move sort of in and out of position. So if they are relying too much on their hands, or they're really sort of relying on this, as they're moving in and out of these positions, they'll be really late on the pitch. And so that gives them really good feedback. Again, if the hitter can handle it, the long trainer is a good tool to add on top of those drills to really, really give them just tons of feedback and to start to pattern better patterns.